On the south side of Youngstown, about 4 miles from the heart of town, lies a place of echoes and memories. Paint peels from empty buildings, and leaves rustle quietly across crumbling pavements. Like the skeletons of vast prehistoric monsters, wooden frameworks tower above the buildings. Sometimes you can hear the wind drifting through the timbers. It has been said that there are few places on earth as lonely and sad as an abandoned amusement park. To a stranger walking here for the first time, it is hard to believe that once this place teemed with life, that once music and children's laughter filled the air. The special smells of popcorn and cotton candy and French fries drifted over a crowded midway. The earth shook with the roar of a mighty roller coaster called the Wildcat, and happy screams of teenagers could be heard in the treetops. For this was a place of youth and innocence, of wild excitement and gentle laughter, of wide-eyed children chased by weary but smiling mothers. It was a place where young loves began or old ones were strengthened. And at night, oh yes, at night, what a magic place this was! How the midway glowed with thousands of lights. Young lovers walked boldly arm in arm or shyly held hands. Couples deeply in love or falling in love glided gracefully over a dance floor to the music of the big bands. Yes, it is hard for a stranger to picture all these marvelous things, but for almost 90 years it was so. For this was Idora Park. And if that stranger should ask any one of tens of thousands of people in the Youngstown area about this place, that name will bring a nostalgic smile and perhaps a quiet tear. And so, to all of those who remember, to those who were there, or wish they had been there, come along with us and rediscover Idora Park. The park had its beginnings in the last century. In the 1890s, the Park and Falls Street Railway built Idora Park in order to draw more passengers to the streetcars. Originally, it was called simply Terminal Park because it stood at the end of the streetcar line. There are several stories about where the name Idora came from. One of the best known states that after the park's first year, a local school teacher won a competition to determine the most popular teacher in the area. As part of her recognition, she was given the honor of naming the new park. She named it Idora, but no one knows for certain why or where she got the name. Suggestions have run anywhere from the Idora Indians, who supposedly visited the area regularly many years earlier, to simply a whimsical shortening of the phrase, I adore a park. Starting with little more than an outdoor theater, a merry-go-round, and a dance hall, Idora grew rapidly. In the early years, people came mostly by streetcar. And on weekends, the streetcars to the park were nearly always crowded. Each year, new rides and attractions were added. In 1902, Idora's first roller coaster was built. It was described as a three-way figure eight. The outdoor theater was perhaps the biggest attraction at the park. Many of the best vaudeville acts in the country came to Idora Park. The theater became so popular that the park finally installed seating for nearly 2,500 people. The area was roofed over, enclosed with a canvas wall, and an admission fee charged. A second roller coaster was added in 1910, and it still stands today. Built by the T.M. Harton Company of Pittsburgh, the coaster was lengthened and recontoured in the 30s. It is remembered by thousands as the Jackrabbit. Dancing was so popular in those days that Idora Park quickly outgrew its dance hall. A new giant ballroom was built at the other end of the park, and the streetcar lines were extended to better serve the growing crowds. The ballroom building would be greatly changed over the years. It may be hard to imagine, but this is the same ballroom that still stands today. And if the looks of the building changed a lot over the passing years, it was nothing compared to the music that played inside. The story of the Idora Park Ballroom is also the story of music in America from 1910 to the mid-1980s. Everything from John Philip Sousa marches to the big band sounds to the rock band sounds have been heard within the ballroom. And couples have danced everything from waltzes to the Charleston to the twist, and have danced to everything from big band concerts to sock hops to the 70s disco beat. The music of over 2 generations echo down through the years of the Idora Park Ballroom. To those who lived through the park's first 2 decades, it must have seemed as if Idora would go on growing forever. Between 1911 and 1920, the park added a photo studio, a penny arcade, several picnic shelters, a pony track, and several new rides. The park also acquired the baseball field. Among the new rides was the Old Mill, a water ride through artificial caves. Dark rides like this one were especially popular in those days because they gave young couples something quite rare for the time: a chance to be alone in the dark together, even if it was only for a minute or two. Other changes in the teens included a new roller rink, a new carousel, 2 new roller coasters, and a circle swing. The circle swing would stand until the park closed, and is remembered by people today as the rocket ships. The new carousel and one of the roller coasters replaced the old carousel and the figure eight coaster. The old roller rink, which had been the park's first dance hall, ended its days as the Crazy Horse Saloon. The Roaring '20s were a golden age for America's amusement parks, and Idora boomed. So many people had cars by the '20s that the streetcar company decided it was time to get out of the amusement park business. In 1924, the park was sold to the newly formed Idora Amusement Company. Under the new owners, the park continued to grow rapidly. Every season, crowds of over 100,000 were expected. And the crowds, in turn, expected to see even bigger and better attractions. For the second time since the park opened, the carousel was replaced by a larger one. A huge 1.2 million gallon swimming pool was added in the 20s, along with a spacious natatorium. The pool was big enough for 1,500 people. In the late 1930s, the pool became unique when the park owners drilled down 650 feet to tap into an underground saltwater pool. Idora Park had the only saltwater swimming pool in the country. In the late 1920s, just as the nation was starting to plummet into the Great Depression, Idora Park added its last and greatest roller coaster. Designed and built by the Philadelphia Toboggan Company, one of the most famous names in amusement park history, this coaster lives on in fond memories and legends today. More than 50 years later, it was still considered by experts to be one of the top 10 roller coasters in the country. And unlike the name Idora, no one that ever rode the Wildcat ever wondered where it got its name. The 30s and the 40s were stormy years for America and the world. Idora weathered the storm somewhat better than many other parks in the country. Idora had always been a popular park, and its convenient location helped it to survive both the hard times of the 30s and the gas rationing of the war years. People came to Idora to escape first the sad times of the Depression, and later the stress of the war and rigors of the wartime economy. Throughout those turbulent years, Idora could do little in the way of new attractions and rides, but the older attractions remained popular. For over 30 years, the ballroom had drawn large crowds, but in the 40s, the ballroom reached its peak as the big band sound swept the nation. Almost every famous orchestra in the country played Idora Park. By the late 1940s, the swimming pool had lost much of its popularity. For a couple of years, the park tried running small scooter boats in the pool. But by 1950, it was apparent there was literally a growing need for space. The baby boomers were coming, and any amusement park that hoped to survive the 50s would need lots of rides for children. A lot of them. An awful lot of them. So the pool was filled in and covered over with concrete. With the addition of Kiddieland, Idora gained the appearance it would more or less have until the end of its days. This was Idora as most people remember it today. Would you like to go back? Well, come along then and we'll go back. And we'll start where many of us started, at Kiddieland. Some new rides came in the 50s, including The Bug. later called the Turtle, and the Orbiter. Picnics had always been popular at Idora. In fact, company and community picnics were long a vital source of income for amusement parks in the country. And Idora competed fiercely with other parks in the area for these picnics. Parks such as Myers Lake Park in Canton, Euclid Beach in Cleveland, and Westview and Kennywood Parks in Pittsburgh all competed with Idora for industrial picnics. It is a testament to the success of Idora Park through the years that, of all of these parks, Idora outlasted all but Kennywood. The parking lots were nearly always full in those glorious days, and no one seemed to mind or even notice that people now entered Idora from the backside, as the original entrances were along the streetcar tracks. Throughout the turbulent 1960s, Idora continued to draw crowds. In a decade when many of America's grand old amusement parks were going under and closing, Idora managed to survive, even adding new rides and changing old ones. The Rapids was a water ride built about the same time as the Wildcat and ran beneath it. In the 60s, the Rapids was redesigned and became the Lost River. The Flying Cages was a small attraction that came in the 60s. It was little more than a stand-up swing. In the background, we see the original dance hall in one of its many incarnations. At this time, it was called the Heidelberg Gardens. Idora had a miniature train for years, and the C.P. Huntington, with its antique steam engine look, was a later replacement. Idora Park stayed very much in business throughout the uncertain years of the 60s and 70s. It even managed to hold its own against the giant theme parks like Cedar Point. The simple convenience of Idora was a big help, and in its later years, it had a certain added appeal, an atmosphere of graceful age, charm, and dignity that the new parks couldn't hope to match. Many of Idora's older rides remained its best attractions. Some, like the carousel and the Ferris wheel, remained unchanged throughout the years. Others, like the Fun House, would have so many alterations made to them through the years that they were hardly recognizable. By the early 1980s, Idora Park had outlasted nearly all of the parks in the region that it had once competed with. Crowds still came to Idora Park years after Euclid Beach, Myers Lake, and Westview parks were gone. And while the crowds were smaller, Idora could still hold its own against the faraway theme parks. By the early 1980s, the Jackrabbit was considered one of the oldest working roller coasters in the country. And the Wildcat's rightful reputation as one of the world's great coasters was drawing coaster lovers from around the country. If the golden years were gone, Idora Park was still a profitable business, even if those profits were slowly shrinking each year. The long, hard hours of running an amusement park were beginning to tell on the park owners. Feeling a need to move on, and a sincere belief that some new blood might be able to revitalize the park, the owners put the park up for sale after the end of the 1982 season. There were no takers, and the owners began to prepare for the 1983 season. If the park's profits were fading fast, there was still plenty of fun to be found. And even in those final years, Idora Park was still a magic place. By the end of the 1983 season, there were still no buyers for the park. So, the park made plans for the coming season. In April of 1984, as workers were getting the park ready for its 90th season, the little park that had survived good times and bad, and had brought joy to millions over 3 generations, died in a single afternoon. Workers were repairing the Lost River ride beneath the Wildcat. A welding torch, or another hot tool, apparently got too close to the dry timbers. By the time the fire was at last put out, 11 concessions, the park office, the entire Lost River ride, and over 1/4 of the Wildcat had been destroyed. Only the heroic actions of the firefighters had saved the carousel. The fire was the death knell of Idora Park. At first, the owners planned to rebuild the Wildcat at least, but learned sadly that the cost to rebuild would be far beyond anything they could afford. Idora Park did open that season, but it was as if the very soul of the park had died and left a hollow shell. With the park's most famous ride gone, crowds dwindled rapidly. As a weak last-ditch hope, the park reversed the trains on the Jackrabbit and renamed it the Backwabbit, hoping that the novelty of the trains running backwards would draw crowds. But many would not come back to the park at all, not wanting to see the Wildcat in ruins, and unable to picture an Idora Midway without the roar of the Wildcat in their ears. The season was a sad failure. With the park's main attraction gone, nothing could be done to bring the crowds back. On a rainy, dreary day in September, Idora Park closed its gates forever. 90 years of laughter, 90 years of fun and excitement and love had come to an end. By the end of October, most of the park's smaller rides were auctioned off and removed. In the long, lonely years since, Idora Park has been slowly vanishing from the earth. Today, Idora Park stands forlorn and empty, a crumbling monument to a happier, simpler time. The park is still for sale. The realtor hopes to find a buyer that would attempt to at least save some of the remaining historic buildings. The ballroom in particular has been reasonably well preserved. But with each passing year, it seems less and less likely that Idora Park might rise from the ashes like a phoenix in a new and brighter form. The fire that destroyed Idora Park's future also destroyed its past. Almost all of the park's records, photographs, and historic documents were destroyed along with the park office. Little is actually known for certain about the park's early years, and most of that comes from a few surviving old-timers who remember. It will not be too many more years before they too fade away. Today, all that remains of Idora Park are a few weathered buildings, creaking timbers, and memories. In time, perhaps only the memories will remain.